The truth about why you attract the wrong people. Carl Jung observed that what feels like a private romantic misfortune is very often the oldest pattern in the psyche repeating itself in a new costume, and he would ask you to look twice before you call it bad luck. Here is where we begin, plainly, as Jung wrote in Ion, paragraph 17. Projections change the world into the replica of one's own unknown face, and he meant it almost literally. That the face across the table from you at dinner, the one you cannot stop thinking about, the one who felt like fate within an hour of meeting them, is carrying something of yours before they have said a single true word about who they actually are. Jung would stop you right there and say, "Do you see it? You did not fall for a stranger. You fell for a familiar shape wearing a stranger's clothes. And that is the ache underneath so many of your love stories, the eerie sense that you already knew this person. Because in a way, you did. You had been carrying their outline inside you for years, waiting for a body to pour it into want. So let us be honest with each other for a moment. The way two people are honest by a fire, you have probably sat with this exact question at 2 in the morning, turning over a name in your mind, wondering what is wrong with me that I keep choosing this. And I want to tell you, gently, that you are not broken, and you are not alone in this. This is one of the most human patterns there is, and it has a structure, and structures can be seen. And what can be seen can finally be worked with, instead of simply suffered. So here is a small reflection. Just for you, before we go further, I notice the shape I keep falling for, arriving again and again in a different face and a different name. I feel the quiet exhaustion of loving someone new and discovering, months later, the same old wound waiting inside the romance. I am willing to ask what part of this pull is truly them, and what part is a stranger inside my own psyche, looking to finally be known. And here is what I am ready to practice, starting now. Say it with me. I make the unconscious conscious, and again, I make the unconscious conscious. If something in you just went quiet while you said that, good. That is the part of you that already knows this is not really about them. Type the 2 words "face it" in the comments. Right now, before the feeling passes, let it be your small seal on this, a promise to yourself that you are done sleepwalking through this particular room of your life. The first key is, the pull you feel is not a choice, it is a projection landing. And I want you to sit with how strange that actually is, because everything in our culture tells us that attraction is the freest thing we do. Nobody forces you to like someone, you simply do. It feels like the purest, most spontaneous yes the heart ever gives. But Jung looked much closer at this so-called spontaneity and found something less free and far more mechanical underneath it. He wrote, in Collected Works, Volume 17, paragraph 338, that the inner image is unconsciously projected upon the person of the beloved, and that this is one of the main reasons for passionate attraction or aversion. Notice he does not say attraction alone, he pairs it with aversion, because the same mechanism that makes you fall hard can make you recoil hard. Both are the psyche, throwing an inner picture outward and mistaking the screen for the source. This is not romance being reduced to something cold and mechanical. It is romance being told the truth about its own machinery. Imagine a man standing at the edge of a party, scanning a crowded room without even meaning to, and across that room he catches one particular laugh, not the loudest, not the prettiest, just the one that snags him, and within the hour he is convinced he has found something rare, something meant. He will tell his friends later that he simply knew, the way people always say they simply knew. But Jung would ask him gently what exactly he knew, because what actually happened in that room was quieter and older than romance, an inner picture, built across a whole childhood out of a mother's warmth or her absence, out of every early face that taught him what closeness feels like, went looking through that crowd before he ever consciously looked at all, and it found its match in a stranger's laugh. The picture, built quietly across a whole childhood and adolescence, out of your mother, your father, your first heartbreaks, the qualities you were never allowed to become, All of it gets folded into an inner figure Jung called the anima if you are a man carrying her, or the animus if you are a woman carrying him. And this figure does not stay tucked away politely, it goes looking, and when a real living person happens to fit the outline closely enough, the inner picture snaps onto them like a key finding its lock. And in that instant you do not see the person, not yet. You see the picture, wearing their face. It is not that they are wrong for you, it is that you have not yet met them. You have only met your own projection standing in their shoes, and the quicker and more total the certainty, the more this is usually true, the surer you feel in that very first hour. The more likely it is that something older than that hour is doing the deciding. So here is the first quiet reframe. It is not that you keep choosing badly, it is that you keep meeting the same inner stranger before you meet the actual person standing there. I greet the picture honestly, so I can finally meet the person truthfully. The second key is, the type you keep meeting is not out there in the world, it is inside you, doing the choosing before you ever consciously choose anything. Jung called this inner figure part of a syzygy, an old word for a paired opposite, the masculine carrying a feminine image within, the feminine carrying a masculine image within. And this paired figure is not neutral or blank, it has a personality, a history, a temperament, built out of every woman or every man who ever mattered to you before you were old enough to choose anything at all. Think of it less like a preference and more like a fingerprint, pressed into you early and now pressing itself, invisibly, onto every new face you meet. Imagine someone who keeps ending up with partners who start out warm and available and slowly turn distant and withholding. She will tell you, every single time, that this one is different, and every single time she is telling the truth about the surface and missing the truth underneath. Because what she is actually doing is scanning rooms, without ever meaning to, for the outline of an early withholding figure, a parent, an older sibling, someone whose love arrived on a schedule she could never predict. And her inner masculine figure, her animus, has quietly organized itself around that outline, so it recognizes it, lights up at it, calls it chemistry. When a warm and steady and genuinely available person stands nearby, her animus barely notices them. There is no charge, no electricity, because there is no old wound for them to snag on. Now imagine the mirror version of this. A man who cannot explain why he only ever feels pulled toward people who keep him slightly unsure of where he stands. Someone just out of reach. Someone who praises him one week and grows cool the next. He calls it mystery. He calls it a challenge worth pursuing. And all the while his inner feminine figure, his anima, is quietly humming with recognition. Because somewhere far back, love itself first arrived, wrapped in uncertainty, a mother's attention that came and went. An early bond that taught him closeness has to be earned again and again, so now steadiness feels flat to him, almost suspicious, while uncertainty feels like the real thing. This is the part that stings to hear, so let me say it plainly. The boring, safe person you dismissed last year may not have been boring at all. They may simply have failed to fit the shape your unconscious was searching for. And the thrilling one who kept you guessing may not have been special either. Only accurate, a near-perfect match to an old and unhealed outline. This is not fate, and it is not some cosmic twin arrangement written in the stars for you. Jung had no patience for that kind of talk. This is a psychological structure, formed in time, by real experiences, which means, and this matters enormously, it can be seen, and once seen, it can be worked with. Look closely enough at your own history of attractions, and you will likely find not many different types at all, but one type, worn again and again, in different clothing, different names, different cities, the same inner casting call, the same unconscious audition, the same familiar role handed out to whoever walks through the door next. The type is not your destiny, it is your unfinished business, wearing a favorite outfit. I stop mistaking the familiar wound for the right partner. The third key is, watch a single ordinary week, and the pattern stops being theory and starts being undeniable. So let us walk through one, slowly, the way you might walk through your own. On Monday, you meet someone at a friend's gathering, and within 20 minutes, you feel that unmistakable pull, the sense that this conversation matters more than the small talk around it should allow. On Tuesday, you replay 3 sentences they said, turning them over, building a whole private mythology out of a stranger's offhand remark. By Wednesday, you have exchanged numbers, and the messages arrive fast and warm, and you notice, with a small thrill, how easy this feels, how understood you already are. On Thursday, a friend who has known you for years says, gently, over coffee, "Does this remind you of anyone?" And you feel a flash of irritation, because of course it does not. This one is different. On Friday, the first small crack appears. They cancel plans at the last moment, or grow quiet in a way that unsettles you more than it should. And by Saturday, you are lying awake, analyzing a single unanswered message with the same anxious attention you gave, years ago, to a parent's mood at the dinner table. By Sunday, if you are honest, really honest, the shape of the whole week has started to rhyme with a dozen weeks before it. Different name, same rhythm, same climb, same crack, same anxious Saturday night. Now widen the lens a little, because it is not only the days of the week that carry the pattern, it is the hours inside a single day too. Notice the morning version of you, calm, reasonable, telling yourself this is simply a person you enjoy. Notice the afternoon version, checking your phone between meetings, feeling the small drop in your chest when there is nothing there. Notice the evening version, replaying a tone of voice, deciding it meant something it may never have meant at all. 3 versions of you, in one day, orbiting one small uncertain signal, and none of those 3 versions feels like a choice while it is happening. It feels like weather moving through you. And that is precisely Jung's point. When something has not been made conscious, it does not ask your permission before it runs your evening. Now imagine a different person's week, running quietly alongside your own. Imagine a man who has done this 3 times now, with 3 different women, each one warm at first, and then, within a season, cool and hard to reach. And each time he tells his friends, this one is not like the others. And each time, if you watched his week the way we just watched yours, you would see the same Monday spark, the same Wednesday ease, the same Friday crack, the same Saturday vigil. The names change, the faces change, even the cities sometimes change, but the week itself does not change at all. And this is what Jung meant when he wrote, in Ion, that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside, as fate, because a week like this one is exactly that, an inner situation, unmade conscious, wearing the costume of coincidence, wearing the costume of chemistry. Wearing the costume of this one is finally different. When underneath the costume, it is the same inner figure, running the same old errand, in a new stranger's borrowed face. Pause for a moment and pick one real week from your own recent life, one that followed this shape, not to punish yourself for it, but simply to look at it the way you might look at a photograph, from a small distance, with some curiosity instead of only feeling. Notice which day the spark arrived. Notice which day the small crack showed itself. Notice how quickly your body knew before your mind was willing to admit it. This noticing is not betrayal of the person you were thinking of, and it is not proof that nothing between you was real. It is simply the beginning of consciousness. Because once you can see the week as a pattern rather than a story, you have already loosened its grip a little. Patterns can be studied, turned over, learned from, while stories can only be lived inside of blindly, again and again, until someone finally stops to ask, what shape keeps repeating, I watch my ordinary week, instead of only feeling it. The 4th key is, the glow you call chemistry is not proof of rightness, it is the archetype announcing itself. And this is hard to hear, because that glow feels like the realest thing in the world when it happens, like the universe clicking into place, like a verdict handed down for you to obey. Jung took that glow seriously. He did not call it foolishness. He wrote, in Collected Works Volume 9, Part 1, Paragraph 66, That the anima is the archetype of life itself, and a touched archetype carries a charge ordinary experience does not have. It feels numinous, larger than the two people actually standing in the room. This is why new love can feel like religion, like something you would swear was destiny. Imagine a man who meets someone at a dull work conference, bad lighting, worse coffee, and yet within 10 minutes he feels a charge he cannot name. He goes home and tells his brother, "This one is different. I have never felt this before." And his brother, who has heard that exact sentence 3 times in 5 years, says nothing, because there is nothing useful to say to a man standing inside his own archetype. The charge is not lying about its intensity. It really is that strong, but it is lying about its source. He thinks the strength of the feeling measures the rightness of the match, when it only measures how directly this face struck an old deep wire. A struck nerve and a good match are not the same event, though they arrive wearing the same trembling hands and the same sleepless night. And here is the reframe. The feeling is not fake, it is aimed at the archetype and only borrowing the person's face to land on, which is exactly why it so often fades on its own schedule, not because the person changed, but because the charge was never fully about them, and once the projection slips, once you begin to see the actual human being, rather than the glowing outline, the voltage drops. This is the moment people call the honeymoon ending, or love dying, when really the fog is only clearing, and you are finally being given the chance to meet who was standing there all along. Notice too how the glow behaves like an ember, rather than a steady flame, brightest in the first weeks, and then, without any single dramatic cause, quietly dimming. That dimming feels like loss. But it may only be the archetype, stepping back to let the actual person step forward. The glow was never a verdict on your compatibility. It was a signal that something ancient in you had been touched, and signals are meant to be interpreted, not simply obeyed. I do not mistake the glow for the whole truth of the person. The 5th key is the deepest one, and it unfolds in several pieces, so stay with me through all of them, because this is where the whole picture finally locks together. First, consider where this inner figure actually comes from. Jung traced the anima and animus back through childhood, through the mother who was the first woman a boy ever loved, through the father who was the first man a girl ever measured love against, through every early figure who taught the child, wordlessly, what closeness feels like, what safety feels like, what love withheld feels like. And all of that experience does not simply vanish once childhood ends. It condenses. It becomes an inner figure with a temperament of its own, one that Jung said can act with a striking degree of autonomy, almost like a second personality living quietly inside the first. This is why the pull toward the wrong person can feel less like a decision and more like being carried, because in a real sense, you are being carried, not by fate, but by an old inner figure who has been waiting a very long time for a chance to finish something. Second, consider how ordinary this looks from the outside. Imagine a man in his 30s, successful, kind, the kind of person friends describe as steady, who nonetheless finds himself, every few years, drawn to a woman who is brilliant and elusive, and just slightly out of reach. He will tell you, this one listens to him in a way no one else ever has, and he will mean it. But if you sat with him long enough, you would learn that his mother praised him rarely, and only when he had achieved something impressive, so his inner feminine figure, his anima, learned early that love is a reward for performance. And now, decades later, she goes looking for women who make him perform for their attention, mistaking the old ache of never quite being enough for the thrill of finally being chosen. He is not unlucky, he is unfinished, and the ache is doing the choosing for him. Now picture the same mechanism in a smaller, quieter form. An ordinary Thursday evening, a woman coming home from work, tired, finding a message on her phone from someone new, warm but a little vague. Notice what happens inside her before she has even typed a reply. Her chest tightens slightly. A small familiar alertness rises, and she tells herself she is simply excited. But if she paused long enough to actually feel that tightness, She might recognize it as the same tightness she felt as a child, waiting to see which version of a parent walked through the door that night, the warm one or the distracted one. That old vigilance never retired. It only found new doorways to wait behind. Most of these patterns rarely arrive as dramatic revelations. They arrive as small bodily habits, a held breath, a checked phone, a familiar tightening, repeated across so many years that they simply feel like personality, when really they are history, still running third. Consider what disillusionment actually is, because we treat it as tragedy. The day the illusion cracks, the day you finally see them clearly, and it is not what you thought. We grieve that day, we call it the end of love, but Jung saw it almost the opposite way. He taught that the withdrawal of a projection is painful precisely because real consciousness is being born in that pain. There is no birth of consciousness without some form of suffering attached to it. That is simply the price of seeing rather than dreaming. So the moment your certainty cracks, the moment you think, wait, this is not who I thought they were, is not the death of the relationship, it is the first honest beginning of one. Everything before that moment was a kind of dream shared by two people, sincere, moving, even beautiful, but a dream nonetheless. And only after the projection thins does an actual meeting between two real people become possible at all. This is why so many past relationships never got the chance to become real, not because the other person failed some test, but because the dream never cracked long enough for two actual human beings to step into the space where it had been. Fourth, consider Jung's own memory of this exact turning. In Memories, Dreams, Reflections, he recalled a moment with his wife Emma, early in their life together, when he realized their bond could not be reduced to ordinary domestic categories, and when someone asked him what this bond even was, he answered simply, "It is art," meaning it was something made, something worked at, something built consciously out of two people willing to see each other past their first illusions, not something that arrived finished and glowing on day one. That is the quiet scandal at the center of this key. The wrong people are not always wrong. Sometimes they are simply the people you met before you were willing to let the projection crack. And the right people are not chosen by some flawless internal radar. They are built, slowly, out of the willingness to keep looking after the glow fades. Fifth, notice how this plays out across a whole life rather than a single romance. The pattern rarely announces itself loudly. It whispers, in the friend you always excuse, in the partner you keep giving one more chance, in the quiet dread you feel before checking your phone. And each of these small moments is really the same old figure, tapping you on the shoulder, asking to finally be seen instead of simply relived. Every time the old ache rises up disguised as excitement, it is not trying to ruin your life, it is trying to finally be finished. A wound that has never been looked at directly does not go quiet out of politeness. It keeps sending out search parties, dressed up as chemistry, dressed up as fate, dressed up as this one is different, hoping that this time, finally, someone will notice what it actually is. So here is something to actually do this week. Not someday, this week. Pause and pick one real person from your past or present, someone the pull felt undeniable with, and quietly ask yourself what quality in them first electrified you. Then ask a harder question underneath it. Whose absence, or whose coldness, or whose warmth did that quality first remind me of, long before this person ever existed in my life? Write down whatever answer arrives, even a strange or uncomfortable one, and then ask one more question beneath even that one. What was I hoping would finally happen, if this person turned out to be exactly what I imagined? Because buried inside that hope is usually the oldest wish of all. The wish that the old story could finally end differently. This is not an exercise in blame, toward them or toward you. It is an exercise in ownership, taking back a picture you have been unconsciously handing to strangers for years, because every time you can name where a projection came from, you loosen its grip, just slightly, and a little more of your own energy that used to leak outward onto whoever happened to fit the shape, comes home to you instead, where it was always meant to live, I take back the picture I have been handing to strangers. The sixth key is, to finally meet the right kind of person, you have to first meet the one living quietly inside you. And I want to be careful here, because this is not a promise that doing this inner work guarantees you some perfect partner waiting on the other side. Jung made no such promises, and neither will I. What he did teach is that a person who has met their own anima or animus, who has done the work of taking back projections, rather than endlessly handing them out, meets others differently, more slowly perhaps, less thunderstruck, but far more truly, because they are finally able to see another person as a person, rather than as a screen for something unfinished inside themselves. This does not mean the glow disappears entirely, or that attraction becomes cold and clinical. It means the glow gets to be one true thing among several, rather than the only evidence you are allowed to trust. Imagine a man in his 40s who has spent 2 decades falling for the same distant warmth, the same slow fade, and one ordinary Tuesday evening, he sits alone in his kitchen, not searching for anyone, not scrolling for anyone, simply sitting with his own quiet, and for the first time in years, he does not feel the old restless ache to be chosen by someone. He feels, instead, something almost unfamiliar, a kind of company in his own presence, that is not nothing, that is the inner figure finally being greeted, rather than endlessly projected outward, and it is only after evenings like that one, repeated, unspectacular, that he meets someone new and notices, with mild surprise, that the old thunderclap is missing, and in its place is something steadier, something that does not demand to be analyzed at 2 in the morning. This is not the absence of feeling, it is feeling finally freed from an old assignment. So consider, this week, 1 quiet hour, with no one else in the room, not to fix yourself, not to prepare for someone, simply to sit with whatever inner figure has been doing the choosing all along, and let it be seen. The truth about why you attract the wrong people, the whole truth, the one Jung would want you to sit with quietly rather than rush past, is that they were never entirely wrong, and you were never entirely blind. You were simply meeting your own unclaimed self before you had learned to recognize it, standing right there in front of you, wearing someone else's face. And every honest hour you spend with that self is an hour spent preparing a real meeting rather than another borrowed one. I meet the one inside me before I look for the one outside. Here is the whole picture. The pull you feel is not choice, it is projection landing. The type you keep meeting is not out there. It is an inner figure doing the choosing. An ordinary week will show you the pattern if you are brave enough to watch it plainly. The glow is not a verdict. It is an archetype announcing itself and borrowing a face. Disillusionment is not the death of love. It is the first honest beginning of it. And the person you are truly searching for has been waiting quietly inside you the whole time, not as some flawless partner in disguise, but as the part of yourself that has never yet been fully seen or fully claimed. None of these were ever 6 separate lessons. They were 6 turns of a single key. And that key is this. Stop asking why you keep attracting the wrong people, and start asking who inside you keeps doing the choosing. Because the moment you can answer that honestly, the whole pattern loosens its hold on you. Not overnight, not without some grief for illusions you have to let go of, but genuinely, and for good. I notice the shape I have chased across so many different faces. I feel the quiet relief of finally understanding that this was never really about bad luck or wrong timing. I am ready to meet the one inside me before I go looking for the one outside. Say it with me, I make the unconscious conscious. And again, I make the unconscious conscious. So the truth about why you attract the wrong people was never really about them at all, was it? And maybe the better question, the one worth sitting with tonight, by whatever fire you have, is simply this: who have you been asking them to be?